All right, what's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Mafia podcast, NBA edition. My name is Jordan Jaika, aka Dr. Fantasy, and as always, I am here with my co host, the Fantasy Caveman. We are in the middle of our NBA mini series where we are breaking down each and every team's 2019-2020 season and then previewing their upcoming off season. Right now, we're in the middle of the playoff teams that were eliminated. So today's topic is the Philadelphia 76ers. So to kick it off with a recap of this past season, they were 43 and 30 as the 6th seed in the East under head coach Brett Brown. They were eliminated in the first round 4-0 to the Celtics. Their points leader on the year was Joel Embiid with 23 points per game. Tobias Harris second with 19.6. Ben Simmons behind him with 16.4. And Josh Richardson behind them with 13.7. In the rebound department, Joel Embiid also leading the team with 11.6. Ben Simmons with 7.8. Tobias Harris with 6.9. I think we're seeing a theme here. Al Horford with 6.8. And then the assists, another guy maybe you've never heard of, Ben Simmons with 8. Al Horford was actually second the team in assists with 4. Nobody else of note behind him. Steals, another lesser-known guy led the team in steals, Ben Simmons with 2.1. Matisse Thybulle was second with 1.4. And then the blocks department, another new name on the list, Joel Embiid at 1.3. A guy that was tied with him, didn't play in very many games, Norvel Pele. So, yeah. Any notes on anyone that stuck out to you? I know they had quite a few variations in their season leaders here, but any notes that you have on this season for the Sixers?
Okay, okay now. And just to add a little cherry on top, their plus minus leader was Joel Embiid.
Everything. Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. You didn't have to watch one 76ers game.
At plus 3.2. Oh boy. Before we get into players that were impressive, aside from Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, we talked about them enough already. I think the biggest thing heading into this with them is they have a head coaching vacancy right now. Curious to get your thoughts on this, but quickly, I've ran across a couple names that I think would be an interesting fit. I think the first one, is Becky Hammon.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like she's due for a head coaching position at some point. And it's gonna come up sooner rather than later. I think this wouldn't be the worst spot. She'd be actually put in a pretty, even though the roster needs a lot of maneuvering and whatnot, it's not a bad situation for a first time head coach. And I feel like this is a kind of a move that Elton Brand be willing to make. He's made some bold moves, and I think this would be one of them. Another name, and then I'll kick it over to you to see your thoughts on their head coaching vacancy. But Billy Donovan. Billy Donovan, since he left the Thunder, has said he wants to go to a contender. And the fact of the matter is, you don't get many contenders that have head coaching vacancies.
Yeah.
Usually they're contenders, and they're partly contenders because of their head coach. Their head coach stays around. But the 76ers, they were a playoff team and had kind of that championship hopes before the season. I mean, it never panned out for them. But Billy Donovan, assuming this roster stays mostly as constructed, I think this could be something that a guy like Billy Donovan could work with. What are your thoughts on him and the head coaching vacancy for Philly in general?
So let me tell you, I read this last night. This was news last night, and I saw it from a couple people. They have a preferred candidate right now, and the leading candidate for this head coaching position is Mike D'Antoni.
Oh, God.
Which I think is a terrible
Such a bad fit.
I mean, I think Elton Brand is maybe just trying to lose his job at this point if he
I
does that.
did.
But
That's a
I
horrible.
mean, I talked about him on one of our previous lives, but I mean, the 76ers are one of those teams that have just been a mediocre playoff team for the past few years. And with the stars that they think they have, I don't think that they're really championship level stars. Maybe Joel Embiid could be a part of a championship team, but I'm not as optimistic about Ben Simmons. You can't afford to take a chance on a guy like this who he's always been a middle of the road playoff head coach, and that's a reality. He's never been able to bring a team to the next level. I think it's a weird fit because this is a team. I mean, Mike D'Antoni likes to play an up-paced system. I
Yeah.
know he played small ball with the Rockets. He hasn't necessarily always done that, but it's up-paced, and I can't see the 76ers doing that necessarily. So I think
They're
it's a weird fit, but I wouldn't go that direction. I've seen Tyronn Lue connected to them a few times. That's a championship level head coach. I don't think that's a bad move, but that's the theme. Billy Donovan, and I think, could win anywhere. I mean, we already saw that with the Thunder. I mean, that was a roster we talked about all season, and
Oh
he
yeah,
did a
here we
great
go.
job.
Let's
Hey,
talk
I'm
about
not bashing.
Magic
This is
Thunder.
I plot twist. I'm giving the Thunder and Billy Donovan a lot of credit because they played better than their roster. So they, I love Billy Donovan though. I think he's a tough-minded head coach. I think he would be the ideal fit. But they need a championship level head coach. Don't mess around with a roster like this. I mean, I wouldn't be messing around with a guy with no experience. I know the Nets. I that was surprising to me with the Nets when they hired Steve Nash. Not because it's Steve Nash, but because he has no head coaching experience. Now he's a little different than some of these other names, but I think they need that championship caliber coach. So I would hire Billy Donovan if he was interested in the job. That would be my choice.
Yeah, I mean it's not a bad. I mean, I just think Becky Hammond's an interesting name to monitor
Yeah.
because
Yep.
at some point she's going to get a head coaching job. Obviously it seems like Greg Popovich is going to be around in San Antonio next year. Why? I have no idea why he would want to continue coaching at this point.
Yep.
I mean, it does seem like Becky Hammond would just fill in for Greg Popovich but then there's the Tim Duncan, so I don't know. I really don't know which way they are going to go there in San Antonio. But Becky Hammond at some point is going to get a head coaching job.
Yeah.
It's
And
only
it's
a
got to
matter.
take the right team. I mean, not to get too into it, but I mean, it's going to take the right team, though, because the reality is there's still going to be players that wouldn't respect Becky Hammond. As terrible as that is to say, that's a reality of
Yeah,
the society that we live in. So I think it's going to take the right situation. And the GM's really got to know his team and his players before he makes that decision because she's been great with the Spurs and she 100% deserves a head coaching job. And there's people out there that are going to be rooting against her. So it's going to take the right organization for her to succeed.
yeah, which seems like maybe unfortunately her best move is to wait for Popovich to hand him
Yeah.
up. Because I think that would be a perfect situation for her because
Yep.
she already knows the culture. But moving on to players that, I mean, to be honest, there really isn't that much when you talk about this. I mean, they finished 13 games above 500, so you would think there'd be some players, that did good. And there was, aside from the Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid stuff, he's making a lot of money, and I'm sure we're gonna talk about this coming up. But I still like he kind of choked in the playoffs, but Tobias Harris I think was actually very solid for him. He made, especially on a defensive end, he made a lot of strides over where he was the past couple seasons. So he averaged 19 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists, shot about 37% from 3. So about he was about league average from 3. And he was definitely one of their, especially with having Ben Simmons on the court, which is a complete non-factor on the offensive end, and that's an understatement. But he was one of their more reliable guys, especially when they had trouble relying on Joel Embiid because you never knew if he was. It seems like Joel Embiid this season was a game time decision every single game. I mean, obviously that wasn't the case, but it kind of felt like it.
Yeah, I mean, it was
Kind of,
basically the case.
yeah, it kind of felt like every game you didn't know whether Joel Embiid was going to play or not. So Tobias has some really solid availability for him, and I think he did pretty good. As probably as their number two scoring option outside of Embiid.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm gonna go with a guy that I didn't get to mention yet because I mean a lot of the other names are kind of obvious. They have a really nice starting lineup. When you look at their starting five, it's one of the best in the league. But a guy that stuck out to me was one that came off the bench, and it's a guy that you and I have mentioned in the past. But Shake Milton, I got to bring up
Oh
our
yes,
boy Shake Milton.
Shake
But I mean,
Milton.
honestly though, I mean, he started 24 games this year coming off the bench. He averaged 43% from three, 48% from the field. He ended up starting 24 games. He went through a 7-game stretch where he averaged almost 20 points a game while he was starting. And I thought just in general, even when he wasn't starting, he played right around 20 to 25 minutes a night for him. And I thought he was really impressive off the bench.
Oh yeah.
Do I think that maybe he'll ever be a starter year in and year out on a team? No, but I think that he's we've mentioned a guy like DJ Augustine in the past that's been coming off the bench, it seems like, his entire career and has been a great scorer. I think Shake Milton can be that kind of player, have a really nice, long NBA career, just leading a second unit as their point guard. So I was impressed with him and what he can bring to the table, even though I don't think he's a superstar player. You need players like him to win a championship. So I liked what Shake showed this year, so I wanted to throw a shout out to him.
Oh man, I that was nice. And he's actually under. He's one of their few guys that actually makes sense when you're talking about their contract. He's under contract for at least 2 more seasons at under 2 million, and
Okay.
then he has the club option in 22-23 for just about 2 million. So he's one of their few guys that are actually under contract at a good price. So
Mm, yep, that's true. Let's go over. I've already mentioned a lot of these names, but let's go over their depth chart here. At point guard, you have Ben Simmons and then Shake. They had Alec Burks last season. He most likely won't be with the team, I'm assuming. At the two, they have Josh Richardson, Firkin Korkmaz. That's a name we brought up a few times for daily fantasy. I have no idea how to
answer,
actually say
answer.
his name.
Yeah.
But Alec Burks behind him as well. At the three, they had Tobias Harris, Glenn Robinson, and Matisse Thybulle. At the power forward position, they had Al Horford, and then at the five, they have Embiid, Kyle O'Quinn. Um, Not really many big guys there, which is kind of surprising, especially when you consider the injury history of Joel Embiid. And we've already kind of danced around their free agent situation, so they have a few to monitor. I wouldn't say anybody earth-shattering. Glenn Robinson has a player option for this upcoming season. Firkin Korkmaz's contract is non-guaranteed as of right now. The team can choose to guarantee that for the upcoming season. You have Alec Burks, who was coming off the bench for them last season. Kyle O'Quinn. And then you have a few lower end names. I got to mention everybody for Caveman, or he yells
Yes.
at me. Raul Nito, Norvel Pele, Ryan Brokeroff, Mario Shayak. I think he just liked to hear me try to pronounce the two-way
Yeah.
contract
Yep.
names. That's really the reason why. So, what do
Yep.
you think of their free agents? Anyone you think they need to retain?
I mean, if you look at this, Rod, I mean, all their main guys are under contract for over $25 million.
Yeah.
So, which is kind of if you're looking forward. But I mean, like I said, Alec Burks was decent for him, but I think he's gonna definitely fall out of their price range. Glenn Robinson is an interesting name. He's bounced around a little bit, but he's been a very solid role player for the past couple seasons now. I mean, a lot of these guys, like if the Sixers wanted to retain them, they could retain them for cheap, like Nito, Korkmaz. I mean, they're both of those guys are solid shooters, but yeah, they could retain nobody on this list and probably wouldn't matter one bit.
Yeah, I mean that's the challenging part about this off season for them is they really have absolutely no cap flexibility. I mean, this is the first time we've seen four guys making over $27.5 million next season. Al Horford is the low man on the totem pole with $27.5 million.
Hello,
So
man, at 27.5. It's
that's
a
the
horrible pick.
situation they're, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's
Horrible
the
pick.
situation they're in right now is the only way they have any flexibility to make any sort of moves is if they're able to move Al Horford. I mean, there's been some rumblings that they're looking to move on, possibly from this core of Ben Simmons and Embiid. I'm assuming they'd keep Embiid in that situation. I I mean, I'd rather have Embiid over Ben Simmons, even with the injury history. Even Tobias Harris, I mean, that's going to be a contract that's hard to move on from. It gradually increases over the next few years until it's $40 million a season 3 years from now. So Tobias Harris is getting paid right now, but it's tough to talk about this offseason. If I was them, you don't necessarily need to retain Alec Burks. They have other options, especially with Shake being the primary backup point guard and then Korkmaz is the primary bench option at the two. I mean, they don't really need Alec Burks. They can go out and find another veteran present to be their third or fourth guy in terms of playing the one or two. I mean, same with Glenn Robinson. I think this is going to come down to value for them because they don't have a lot of cap flexibility. They need a backup wing option. Glenn Robinson fits that mold. However, if he's not going to fit into their picture financially, there's not going to be any way. So I don't think retaining him is a necessity. You just really need to find a backup wing player if you can't uh, keep him on. And I realistically think that they need to find somebody that's a little stronger 3-point shooter than Glenn Robinson is. And I'll talk about that with their offseason needs. But I mean, let's talk about it. We kind of have to at some
Yeah.
point. So I already mentioned it. Do you think that they should move forward with this core of Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, or if you were them, would you move on from it?
Oof, that's the $1 million question with the Sixers this offseason. I mean, the issue is, and the main problem is the Sixers fans, which I feel kind of bad for. They've been told to trust the process for about 25 years now. It literally seems like they've been told to trust the process ever since AI left. So if they decide, okay, we're gonna trade Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid, it's like they're going through the process again,
Mm-hmm.
basically. And that wouldn't jive well at all with the fan base. As much as the Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid aren't the exact fit, and Al Horford for that matter, they can. I think at this point, if they could just find a way to dump his contract, like they don't. I don't even care at this point if they get anything for him. You just need to get. You just need to try to move on from that contract. That's horrible. That was one of the more puzzling, even more so than the Joel Embiid or Ben Simmons contract. Al Horford does not fit with this team at all. It doesn't seem like he's gelled at all. He wasn't that good last season. So if they can move on from him, so if they can find a team like any team with cap space, like the Knicks.
Mm-hmm.
Just
They
dump
take
all
him.
your bad guys. The sucky thing is Al Horford would go to Knicks and probably be their second best player, which is saying something. Uh,
That's
but
true, though.
I mean, if I had to choose, I'm also keeping Joel Embiid simply because as much as I don't like him so much as a player, he definitely offers more offensively than Ben Simmons. I mean, Ben Simmons, and I'm surprised you didn't say Ben Simmons because of how good Ben Simmons is on the defensive end. He's one of the
That's
best
true.
defensive players in the league, and he could guard 1 through 4 and probably guard some undersized fives because he is like 6'8" or
I think
something
he's
like that.
6'10" now.
6'10",
He
oh,
keeps
6'10". So
growing.
he can pretty much he can guard 1 through 5, which is very beneficial for him. But yeah, I mean, I think they should explore it. I mean, try to move Horford first. Uh, but I think they should definitely look into it if they can. Anything they can do to try to create their some cap flexibility while at the same time not just blowing it up and trading Ben Simmons or Embiid for a package of picks and super young players, because then you're just going through the process again, and nobody really wants it. Everybody was tired of the process. So I think another not so much. I think my other thing not is the right coach. We already talked about it, but you got to find the right coach for this situation. I mean, assuming they keep this core intact, this is still going to be a team that's going to be expected to compete with the talent of Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid and Tobias Harris on their roster. So they're going to need to find the right coach, especially if this core sticks around. But you made a good point about they need to find some more consistent wing shooters, kind of like a guard forward combo that can shoot. I mean, especially since they're probably going to move on from Burks. I actually don't expect them to retain any of their free agents. So as no name as these free agents are, that's a good amount of their shooting that was actually provided to them.
Mm-hmm.
So they're gonna need to look to replace them. They're gonna need to look to replace those shooting either. And this kind of segues into the free agent draft targets, which I'll
go for
mention quick. The interesting thing in this situation, I was telling you about it, they have 4 second-round picks this year. I think that actually is probably the best thing about their offseason. And they have 1 first-rounder, but they could package their first-rounder and maybe a second-rounder or 2 and move up with their 4 second and get a more impact player for them next year. In that route, I think a guy who would be too perfect of a fit for the 76ers if they were able to package their first in a couple seconds would be Aaron Nesmith. You put Aaron Nesmith on that 76ers team, first of all, he instantly becomes their best three-point shooter, which isn't saying that much, but Aaron Nesmith I think is the perfect player that the Sixers need for this system. If they keep Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, you need a guy that can play alongside Ben Simmons that can really space the floor. But other than that, like I said, they don't have a lot. They have They just don't have a little cap flexibility. They have no cap flexibility right now. So they're basically going to be kind of the mid-level exception or biannual exception route. The exact dollar number of that's going to be yet to be determined, but it's actually expected to go down this year with the whole coronavirus thing. But a couple of guys, I mean, Langston Galloway is kind of like that 3-point guy. He shot like around 40% from 3, I believe, this year. That's just one name that I'm thinking of, and then another, and I guess I'll mention him again since he's been slipping down draft boards, and I've mentioned this every pod, and it's just baffling me. Is Josh Green? I think would also be an interesting, and the way he's been slipping down draft boards, he could possibly be available to the Sixers when they believe they have the 23rd or 24th pick in the first
21st
round. So 21st. Okay, I was too off. So he could very well be available for them in that spot. I think he would kind of be another that 3-and-D guard / wing guy there for him.
Yep. Yeah, and I agree for the most part. I think their 2 biggest needs are one, just shooting. I mean, we haven't really gone that in depth, but it's pretty publicly known how terrible of a shooter Ben Simmons is. So they just need he's the kind of guy they need. His career 8% from 3-point land. So, I mean, they need to surround him and this team in general with more shooters. That's number 1. And number 2 for me is definitely finding some big man depth. And we've mentioned it before. There's a ton of veteran guys out there they can go out and grab this year. But when you look behind Al Horford and Joel Embiid, especially with Kyle O'Quinn, he's not a big name, but he's played solid minutes for teams before. I mean, they have nobody once he's a free agent this year. So Behind Embiid and Horford, they'll legitimately have nobody, and I expect them to probably attack that with their 4 second-round picks. I'm not going to go throwing around second-round pick guys potentially that they could go after, but with that first-round pick, I do think that I agree with you that they'll go after more of a 3 and D kind of guy, more emphasis on the 3. If they could somehow leverage their way into Aaron Neesmith, that would be fantastic.
I
I
mean, they
mean, that is
have
legit.
the capital, especially
Hey, yeah.
with 4 second rounders. They could package that 21st, and because obviously I doubt Neesmith's not slipping to 21.
No.
But they have the draft capital with this 4 second rounders, the package that 21st and a second or two to move up some spots to possibly, because that's realistic for them.
Yeah, the tough part about that is, I mean, if you can do it, it depends what the asking price is, but they need to fill out this roster, and they don't have a lot of cap space to do it. So those second round picks could be kind of critical in filling out their
Yeah.
roster without paying a lot of money. So that's why it'll be interesting. I wouldn't, if I was them, be giving up 3 second-round picks in my first to move up. But if it was 1 and 2 second-round picks, I think maybe. And they have some high picks in the second round.
Mm-hmm.
2 of them, I believe, are in the top 5 or 6. So they, yeah, they're high here. They're number 4 and 6. So yeah, I mean they're upper end second-round picks, and the other ones are mid to late. So that'll be interesting because that might be the best leverage they have this season. It's those 4 second-round picks. So a few names, I agree. I had Josh Green down. I also had Devin Dotson and Tyrese Maxey. They're not as strong as 3-point shooters as Josh Green, but they can score the ball. I wanted to mention some veteran guys that can shoot the ball as well. And this is more, I think they'd have to move on from Al Horford to get any of these names, but there's shooters in this free agent class. Davis Bertans, I think, would be a perfect replacement for Al Horford, a bigger guy, one of the best 3-point shooters in the league this past season. I mean, there's other, Joe Harris, if there's a way they could possibly attain Joe Harris, I think that would be legitimately perfect.
They would have to move on from like 3 of those contracts.
Probably just Horford and his 27.5, but either way, I mean,
yeah,
it's possible.
Sign and trade. The Nets.
Yeah.
Sign.
I mean, at that
trade,
point, why not?
Trade Al Horford and like and a couple seconds for Joe Harris. Boom.
Done. All right, make it happen. What are we even here for? I mean, we have bigger things to do than talk about this. But we got to go make trades for the 76ers now. The rest of these names, it just comes down to whether or not they move on from some of their big contracts. Evan Fournier is a great 3-point shooter. Austin Rivers off the bench has been a great 3-point shooter. Jordan Clarkson, Malik Beasley. I mean, there's lots of guys that you could bring in that can shoot the ball, but it's just a matter of, are they going to have the cap space? So I think it'll be interesting. There's 1 of 2 ways they can go about this. They can keep the draft capital they have and fill in their missing holes with the big man depth and shooting through the draft, or they can move on. And realistically, if you're getting rid of Al Horford's contract, you're probably going to have to attach that with some picks to get rid of him. So, they can go that route, get rid of Horford and a few picks, and then sign another free agent potentially. So there's a couple different routes they could go, but definitely shooting. And like I said, I think big man depth definitely needs to be on their list because Embiid's had injury concerns and they have no depth behind him. So that's concerning for them, especially if they want to be competitive when he's not on the floor. That's important for them. So let's go over to, we always wrap it up here with where we see them finishing in the future. Mm-hmm. They were the 6th seed last year in an Eastern Conference that I mean, it's much weaker than the West, obviously, but as long as they have the same roster, I don't really see any scenario in which they fall out of the playoffs. I mean, we haven't even mentioned a really strong defensive team as well. Mm-hmm. One of the best in the Eastern Conference. They were top 5 in terms of opponents' points allowed. So really strong defensively. If they bring in the right head coach, bring in a few more shooters, there's no reason they can't compete in this Eastern Conference. Do they have the firepower to win a championship? I don't think so, but we're also seeing the Miami Heat do it without a ton of firepower right now as well. So, I mean, the 76ers are in a solid place. They just need a coach and some shooting to bring them to that next level. And realistically, I think a big part of it is Ben Simmons improving his offensive game if they're committed to him.
The That's a lot to ask of Ben Simmons.
At this point, I guess.
Improve on his 8% 3-point. I think at this point, I really don't think you're going to see Ben Simmons improve on his on it at this point. You hit on you made some good points. I mean, they're going to be around. I mean, a team that even though they're not superstars, I think Joel Embiid is kind of on the cusp. To me, he's almost on that superstar level just because of his ability especially on the offensive end, and he's not a bad defender, but he's not that superstar yet. But they have the talent between Embiid and Simmons and Tobias Harris, where if that team fails to make the playoffs, that'd be such a disappointment, especially in that weak Eastern Conference. Even if they stay as is and make no moves, and the only guys they add are their whatever guys they draft. So I expect them. I mean, some of it depends on the coach. I mean, you mentioned Miami. I think that's an interesting comparison that you see with the right coach. What they've been able to, they have the right coach for them in Eric Spoelstra. So if they can get an Eric Spoelstra type guy that kind of lead the way in Philly, I can possibly see them, being, a team that we're not talking about leaving the Mexicans swept in did they sweep or did they get losing 5?
They got swept.
They got swept. That's what I thought. So if the right coach and if they can, see, they're gonna be a playoff team, but there's really not a lot of reason for optimism. Their guys are they are what they are at this point. With Embiid and Simmons and Tobias Harris, and if Al Horford's still on the roster, they kind of are what they are, and they're going to be a mediocre 6-7 seed in the East and probably get swept in the first round again. So I feel that's kind of, unless they're able to somehow, if they're able to move on from Horford, and which is I feel is going to be a very tall task for them to be able to do. But if they can move on from Horford, give them some flexibility to go out and try to sign somebody else that better fits their system, then this could possibly be a new conversation, but I'm not seeing that happening. So probably same as they were last year. So that's where we're at.
Yeah, definitely an interesting offseason for them. They definitely have to ask themselves a lot of questions. I mean, we also have to recognize the reality that maybe they don't care if the fans have to go through the process again.
Yep.
I mean, if they get a juicy enough offer for Ben Simmons or Embiid, I mean, they're at a position. For me personally, I don't think enough teams play to win championships. And I think, in my opinion, right now, you're not going to win a championship with the way that this team is constructed. I mean, I'd rather keep going through the process rather than just being an average playoff team forever. So, I mean, it's an interesting offseason for them because they don't have a head coach. I don't think they're going to completely hit the reset button right now, because if they were, they would have fired Elton Brand and had a new GM come in. Because if you're going to start the process over again, at least let a guy, bring in his own coach, his own players, let them draft, let them make the trades that need to be made. So I doubt that this is the offseason. But a year from now, if we're talking about the 76ers as a 6 seed that got eliminated in the first round again, it's possible they just completely hit the reset button, fire Elton Brand, and start over. Because realistically, do they just want to keep hovering in mediocrity for the next 20 years? No, just reset and start again. Ben Simmons.
Bring in AI head coach.
Oh, gosh.
Sixers
AI would be a terrible head coach. I don't want to even talk about that. That's makes me sick to my stomach.
We're talking about the 76ers. We got to bring up one of their greats at least a couple times.
Is that the first time that you brought up AI in this entire 76ers episode?
No, I did earlier when I did once earlier when we were talking kind of about how they really haven't had trust the process since AI last. So
I guess.
I did mention them once in the beginning, so 2 mentions of AI, so I'm good to go.
That's not bad at all. I was expecting a lot more than that. So this was a fantastic episode. Thank you guys for watching this non-AI Talk 76ers episode. We're going to keep rolling through the playoff teams that have been eliminated here. And with the NBA draft getting pushed back, we'll probably have some prospect pods coming out once we finish up this series. But if you missed any of the ones we did previously, you can search on YouTube. We have an NBA playlist that I set up. So you can go back and look through all of our previous NBA
Washington
content.
Wizards pod.
The Washington Wizards pod and video is very popular right now. I don't know if it's just Caveman watching it on a loop all day, but yeah, it's go out and check out all of our past previews and any of our prospect pods. All of that's on our YouTube channel. We're putting everything on Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts now, so you can subscribe to that. But keep an eye out. Lots of great content to come in the next few weeks. We'll have an NBA champion as soon as you know it. We've gone live talking through the playoffs, so make sure you check that out. But we appreciate all the support, and we'll see you guys next time.
Yeah.